Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and if folks have arrived late, we'll catch them up. So welcome to our maybe 7th policy meeting for the Our Salem project. I'm Eunice Kim, and there's a lot of staff here with me today, and I'll let them introduce themselves as Austin, Glenn, Jason, Keith, and Sarah. Go ahead.
Hi everybody, I'm Austin Ross. I'm a long-range planner with the City of Salem.
I'm Glenn Davis. I'm the Chief Development Engineer with the City of Salem Public Works.
I'm Sarah Stroll. I'm the City Librarian for the Salem Public Library.
I'm Jason Pulley. I'm with the Utilities Planning Group with Salem Public Works.
Hi, I'm Keith Garlinghouse with the Utilities Planning Group, Salem Public Works.
Great. Thank you everyone for being here today. So today, if you can tell from the folks who are with us, the focus is on community and public facilities and services. So that's everything from kind of water, sewer, stormwater infrastructure to community services, libraries, other things related to the community. So today I'm going to give just a brief overview, like meetings past, of where we are in the project and what the project is. And then we're going to really focus again on policy ideas that have been previously drafted as part of the visioning work that we've done in the community over the last year and a half, 2 years, as well as new ideas that we've researched in other communities, as well as ideas that have come more recently from the community. Throughout this meeting, feel free to drop questions in the chat. We will try to address them as we go, or drop comments in the chat as well. So just as a reminder, we're working on the Our Salem project. This is a multi-year project to update what's known as our comprehensive plan. That is the big framework that really guides how we grow and develop in the future. It has goals and policies and words that really kind of direct that growth and really spell out what our priorities and intentions are, as well as a map and a proposed comprehensive plan map. Today, the focus really is on the words, the goals, and the policies, and we'll walk through that in a second. This is a map hopefully you're all familiar with. The black dash line is Salem city limits. The area we're planning for, though, is this gray area, our portion of the urban growth boundary. This includes portions of Marion and Polk County that are urbanized. So it's inside our urban growth boundary, which I guess I should explain that the urban growth boundary really is intended to contain our urban growth so that we can preserve and protect our farm and forest lands on the outside. So if you've ever kind of driven along Cordon Road, you're driving along the urban growth boundary. We're really trying to plan for that growth and manage the growth that's coming in the next 10, 20, 30 years within this gray area inside our portion of the urban growth boundary. So where are we in this project? As I mentioned a little bit, we worked on visioning in the broader community over the last, again, year and a half, 2 years, and we took all of that input and rolled it up into a vision document that has high-level goals across housing, economic development, public services, the environment, natural resources, as well as a proposed comprehensive plan map. And that vision document we took to the council in March and asked them for acceptance. It wasn't a formal adoption process, but we were really asking the council, are we heading in the right direction so we can then work on all the details? They did say that they accepted it, and so now we're working on all those details. There's a lot of details going on right now. There's a lot of different ways to kind of plug into this project depending on your interests. There's the zoning map, the zoning code, but today we're really focused on policies. The goal is to really get your input on policy ideas, new policy ideas, ideas that you have, so we can revise our list of draft policies and add to them. So is this a 1, 2, 3? I think this is the 7th meeting. We've been meeting weekly since the end of March on different topics. We've covered housing, transportation, parks and recreation, and hopefully you've joined us for some of those. If you haven't, all of those meetings are recorded and are online as well as our chats. So we're making all of our chats public. So if you put something in the chat, you'll see it on our project website. So the meeting today is really focused on community and public facilities and services. And we'll be talking through, again, a whole host of ideas from everything from, again, our water infrastructure to our libraries. Next week's meeting was initially going to be a placeholder if there was a topic we needed to circle back to. But instead, we're going to really focus that on our interactive map, our proposed zoning map that we released a couple weeks ago. And so if you're interested in zoning and what's happening or what's proposed on specific properties, please join us next week. So today what we're going to do is present, again, different policy ideas. And so we'll present and give examples of what we mean by those ideas. And then we're going to do some live polling. If you've joined us before, you know you can vote either on your phone via text or through a web browser, both on your computer or on your phone. And again, anytime, feel free to drop questions or comments in the chat. And if you're watching online and you're not in the Zoom meeting, you can also vote as well. So we're going to practice the live polling. Just as an explanation, that if you're joining us on text and you text eKIM847, it's a new tag, I guess, to 22333, you will then get a text response that says you've joined this session, Eunice's session. And if you're online, it's pollev.com/EKIM847. So that's how you can log into the session, and you'll see questions. They'll pop up on your screen. You don't have to refresh. They'll automatically pop up. So we're going to give it a try. And the link has, the chat has the link if you just want to click on that link. We just want to make sure it works for everyone. If you're having technical difficulties, let us know. It's still kind of a new technology that we're using. So, and Austin, what do you think for numbers?
I think we're shooting for around 12.
Okay, great, thank you.
Maybe while people are voting, there's a question in the chat already that we could talk about.
Sure, let me just scroll up. Is there a new estimate for population 2035 less than before? Yes, there's a new population forecast that PSU has done out to, I think the first mark is 2045. We have reviewed that and we're actually going to meet with PSU as well as the counties and others to talk about that. It does, like you're suggesting, it is a lower forecast. It doesn't align with all of our data. It doesn't align with the growth we've been seeing. So we're going to be talking with them on that. So once we kind of have a better understanding of the assumptions and all of that, we will be, I'm happy to talk more about it. That we're going to meet with PSU again this week. Thanks for that question. Who was that? Jim. Is the polling working for everyone?
If anyone's having issues, they can drop a note in the chat and we'll do our best to help you out.
Okay, you want to move on, Austin, and then we'll see. So there's a lot of planning going on in Salem. I think there's a big project that's going on citywide is the Climate Action Plan. That plan is really looking at how we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as well as build a more resilient community. The City Council recently, maybe it was last year now, set a greenhouse gas reduction goal of carbon neutral by 2050. So there's a lot of strategies that are going to come out of that plan that will overlap with our Salem. So we're closely coordinating on that project, and you'll see those overlaps. In addition, Salem we updated our historic preservation plan. I think, again, that was last year. Kimberly Fitzgerald with the Planning Division led that project. And that has specific goals and actions related to historic preservation that we are incorporating into our Salem. And there's a lot of work going on in addition with utilities, and I will let Keith and Jason talk to that. So we're coordinating across a lot of departments and a lot of different projects because, as you know, we're not starting from scratch. We're not building a new community. We're trying to really just manage the growth, making sure that we're meeting the needs of both residents that live here today as well as residents, businesses, et cetera, that move here in the future. So this is our vision statement that we brought to the council in March in the vision document. And just just wanted to show that it's very high level. It talks about, again, livable, equitable, carbon neutral city. And this is really kind of the vision and of the shared priorities that we've heard throughout the community. And as we work on goals and more detailed policies, I just wanted to make sure everyone kind of kept this in mind, that this is kind of the future vision. This is what we heard from the community, what Salem wants to be in the future. So here's just a quick sample of the many goals we have related to public facilities and services. You'll see that they're pretty broad. So we have one on community spaces and culture. We've heard pretty loud and clear that it's important to the community that there are places where people can gather, that our culture is celebrated. Access to food is a newer idea that we don't have in our current comprehensive plan, but it is something that we've definitely heard is a priority as we move forward, both in terms of resiliency and walkable communities and health. Public facilities and services is really a very important and critical backbone of how we grow in this city. It may not be things that everyone talks about, like water, sewer, stormwater, but it is critical. And so that's why we're meeting today. And we want to make sure that we're really fleshing out those ideas and understand how our growth can be supported by our infrastructure. And then historic preservation, I mentioned earlier, there's a historic preservation plan, and I can drop the link in the chat if you want to take a look at that. But that plan has been adopted, and we are folding some of those goals and policies into the comp plan. So today, the goal is to really deep dive more into, those are very, high level, pretty broad, but really deep dive into some of the details. And so I'm going to pass it off to Austin. He's going to talk through some of the ideas that we've already presented in the vision document and that we drafted previously. Austin?
Thanks, Eunice. So I'm going to start with some ideas that, like Eunice said, were presented in our Salem vision. So you'll notice that these ideas are summarized from that document. So it's important to remember that we're not trying to wordsmith today. We're just testing the ideas. And most of these ideas came from outreach that we've done in previous phases of the project that we took notes on, made sure we included, but haven't necessarily had a chance to test them with the community yet broadly. So that's what we're doing here. Let's see, it's important to remember just a small sample of the ideas that we've drafted previously. So we'd encourage you to check out the project website, where we have a full list of the ideas that were previously drafted, as well as new ideas that we're considering. So you can do that. And we have a survey on the website as well that you can take and give us additional feedback if you'd like. As we go through this, it's important to remember a couple things about the verbiage that we're using. So when you see words like encourage or promote, that's talking about giving incentives to do those things. If you see something like require, that's more like a mandate to do something. So just understanding the difference between what we're encouraging people to do, incentivizing, or requiring people to do is important. And then as we go through this, feel free, like we've said, to drop questions in the chat, and we'll have a chance to discuss them. And if you just have a comment as well, that's fine to drop in the chat. That'll give us a record of it so that we can use that information later as well. So I already see a couple questions in there, but let's jump to the first set of previously drafted ideas, and then we can talk about those questions while people vote. So this first group is about community spaces and culture. So the first community spaces is about encouraging businesses, schools, and other organizations to provide community space within their facilities. We've heard that there are limited spaces within the community that are publicly accessible for things like meetings. And so this policy would encourage people to provide spaces within their private buildings so that the public can use them potentially. The one about cultural spaces is about designating cultural places within Salem. We would do that work with community organizations or the sovereign tribes to designate those places and make sure that they are recognized and preserved. The one about art is just generally about allowing more public art, especially locally created public art in Salem. And then the one about open spaces is encouraging both natural and man-made open spaces throughout the city. So whether that's protecting areas that are currently forested and making sure that they're preserved as natural open space, or providing more like public plazas and things like that. So we're going to jump over to the poll, and what we're asking you to do is vote for each of these ideas that you like. So you can vote for all of them or just a couple of them, whatever you think is a good idea to have in our comprehensive plan, and make sure that that is a priority for the future. So while people are voting, I'm going to go back to these ideas so that people can read them, make sure that they're understanding them. If you need clarification, please let us know. And I'm going to jump to that question that I saw now. So the question says, can you briefly summarize the current status of comment spaces with respect to community gathering spaces, or give a link to where this is covered in the City of Salem website? Oh, community spaces, sorry. Current status of community spaces. Eunice, do you want to maybe talk about that, or someone else?
Yeah, I'm dropping it in the link, the ideas that have been previously drafted as well as the new ideas.
Thanks. Is that what you were thinking, Henry? I also see one that says we should have more murals downtown, especially in alleys. See the art alley in Rapid City, South Dakota. Love that. That goes along with that art policy. It seems limiting to call out only locally created art. You would not call out local writers for the libraries. That's fair. So maybe there's a balance to be struck between highlighting local artists as well as others. So looking at the votes coming in here. Just take out the word local. I appreciate that comment. We've also had some people suggest that that's specifically what we should add. So we'll try our best to suss out the right level of localness. Looks like I don't see any more votes coming in, so let's jump to the next group here. These policies are about public facilities and services, and then one about stormwater management. So the first idea is about library services and maintaining and enhancing access to those services across the city, but especially in areas that are underserved right now. The next one is about community centers. So encouraging the development of more community centers across Salem, especially equitably distributed. So focusing on areas that don't have great access to those now, and making sure that they serve all ages and abilities. The one about schools is about the city collaborating with the school district to align services with changes in growth and population. So that's something that throughout this project, we've been working with the school district to understand the potential implications of our planning and their planning and how they overlap. And this would be a policy that encourages us to keep doing that in the future. And then the one about flood risk mitigation is kind of a call out to that stormwater management plan. So this is one of the policies that was in that plan that was adopted that we're looking at rolling up into the comprehensive plan as well, so that it's codified there as well.
And Austin, there's a question about why we can't strive for more branch libraries like Portland. And I was wondering if we could give Sarah an opportunity to respond.
Yeah, please.
So I believe within this comprehensive plan, I think that we all love the idea of more locations, but I don't know that the resources are going to be there to make that happen in this time period. But, so maintaining and enhancing access to library services also means a number of other things that we could do, including things like, a fleet of bookmobiles of some sort. And so we're really looking at all of the different options to provide service in a variety of different ways, including locations. But I don't think we want to be tied into a very specific ask for that, I guess, in this policy. Does that make sense, Eunice?
Yes, and I was going to drop the actual full language. So this is all really truncated language. The actual
Right.
draft policy does include a branch library, so I'm going to just, sorry for the
Right.
formatting, I copied and pasted, but that's what it actually says. That
But
makes
I
sense.
appreciate the comment that
Yeah.
making it a priority can help us to find that those additional resources needed. So thanks.
Right. And I'm happy to hear that.
Thanks, Sarah. Somebody suggesting school and library shared facilities, certainly that's possible, and working with the school district to coordinate that is an option. I know that the school has their own priorities and things to think about. So yeah, that would take some additional outreach, I guess. But so looking at the votes here, just gonna wait and see if anybody hasn't had a chance to get their votes in yet. Somebody suggesting that it's important to preserve existing library services in addition to enhancing services elsewhere. All right, looks like most of our votes are in here. So why don't we go to the next group? This one is about service provision and development. So the first one is about extension of services. So when new development is taking place, or when we're extending to service to undeveloped land, making sure that we're doing it efficiently and orderly, cost effectively. The one about wastewater systems is about maintaining adequate capacity in the wastewater system, and making sure that we have the room in our collection and treatment systems to accommodate growth. The one about seismic resiliency is about pursuing that, making our key water and wastewater facilities more seismically resilient, and making sure that in the case of a natural disaster that those would continue to be functional. And then the one about water diversification is about pursuing diverse water sources for our drinking water supply, and making sure that we aren't locked into just one source and making that system more resilient. So jumping over to the poll here.
And some of these are things that the city really is already doing, pursuing, for example, resiliency for our water infrastructure and diversification. So I don't know if, Jason, I don't mean to put you on the spot. You don't have to chime in, but I just wanted to say that these are some of the things we're already as a city pursuing. Looks like a question. Jason, you want to take it about water resiliency?
Yeah, okay, sorry about that. How more resilient water sources? Well, so just in a nutshell, right? The city relies on the North San Juan River for the majority, almost 100% of our water source. The idea here is to be more resilient, we would need to be able to rely on more than one source. And so our plan is to look at additional resources within the city that we already have access to. That includes a combination of expanding our capabilities with our aquifer storage and recovery system that's already in place, developing additional groundwater sources that are strategically located around the community so that those could be used in a case of emergency. They could be essentially water stations after a large earthquake, for example. And then obviously the Willamette River, and the city holds a considerable amount of water rights on the Willamette River. And the long-term goal, and so we're talking, 50 plus years, would be to develop an additional source from the Willamette River. Obviously, that is going to be an expensive endeavor, and so it's something that it's not really on the table right now. We've invested a tremendous amount of money over the last 2 years at our treatment plant outside the city of Staten, and so we're doing everything we can to make that water source as reliable as possible. But as we look to the future, we think a goal of the city should be to develop additional water sources that make our system that much more resilient and are not relying on a single source of water.
Thanks, Jason. There's a question also asking about whether we can look at the Coast Range for sources of water. Is that something that could potentially be in the future?
Well, like I just said, it's not really the quantity of water that's going to be the issue. It's really going to be the the development of it and constructing treatment facilities. We have enough water rights on the North San Juan River that will last us for the next 100 years. If we look further than that, with the addition of the Willamette water supply, that would get us a long ways in the future. And one of the things that really helps us is the operation of the Willamette dams by the Corps of Engineers, because we have a pool, even if it's not a full pool some years behind Detroit Dam, that protects the flow of water in the North San Juan River. And those 13 dams operated by the Corps do the same thing for the main stem of the Willamette. So it's not really going after or needing additional water sources. It's really doing a timely development and bringing those sources online when the community needs them.
Got it. Thank you. There's also a comment about the extension of services potentially working against our climate action goals. So it's important to remember that lands that are already within the urban growth boundary are lands that are marked for development. And so we wouldn't necessarily restrict new development within the urban growth boundary, but we also aren't looking at this time at expanding the urban growth boundary, but using the land that we currently have. So yeah. So looking at the votes here, making sure that we've got space or that everybody's had a chance to vote. And I think this poll stay open until we start the next one. So if people haven't quite had a chance, they can keep voting while we talk about the next group. So these ones are primarily about food and then one about historic preservation. So the fresh food idea is about encouraging grocery stores, food co-ops, markets, things like that, more broadly across Salem, especially in areas with limited access now, to improve access to healthy fresh foods. The locally grown food is similar, but it's more about promoting farmers markets and community gardens to increase that food access and to help reduce food insecurity. The one about urban animals is about allowing a limited number of animals within the urban setting to help produce food for personal consumption. So that's not talking about a farm, but the city already allows a limited number of chickens on people's property, things like that. So this policy would make sure that that's in the comprehensive plan so that we could maintain that into the future. And then this archaeological resources policy is an example of one from the historic preservation plan that was adopted that we're looking at rolling up into the comprehensive plan. So it's about encouraging the preservation of important resources and working with property owners and developers, the state and sovereign tribes to help ensure that they are preserved. So we'll jump over to the poll on this one as well, and then take a look at some of the questions. So one of them says, Salem's water and wastewater system is aging. There are miles of pipes that were laid down a half century ago. Do we have a goal statement related to replacing that infrastructure? Jason, do you want to talk about that perhaps?
Well, yes, the aging infrastructure is a given, and we are fully aware of it. No, we don't have a goal statement related to replacing it, and we haven't and we haven't committed to, say a full replacement in X number of years, because it's just, it wouldn't, regardless of what timeline we set, I still don't know, if you could go through a comprehensive replacement of the entire system. What I will say is in our planning efforts, and we have a water master plan that is currently underway, and a wastewater collection system master plan that will be kicking off in a couple of months. And both of those plans do exactly what you're pointing to, which is doing a condition assessment of our current system. This is pipes and pumps and buildings and everything of that nature, and identifying those priorities where we need to look at replacing those pipes and pumps and buildings. And so those high priority projects get placed into our CIP, our capital improvement plan, every year, and are budgeted for. So we are doing it, probably not as fast as the community would like, probably not as fast as we would like, as we are the ones that have to operate the system. And we recognize that we do have some problems in our system, but we are underway planning to address those in the very near future.
Great, thanks, Jason. And I think that gets at the previous policy that we looked at about maintaining the needed levels of service. So I appreciate that. There's a question that says, what about food forests? We actually have a new idea coming up a little bit later in the presentation that gets at that idea. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and look forward to any thoughts you have about that when we get to that question. Suggestion about an indoor mercado. Love that. Has the city ever considered partnering with for-profit organizations such as Northwest Natural to address the costs of water utility facilities? I believe they currently own and operate 15 across the US, so a private-public partnership approach. I'm gonna defer to somebody else on that one.
The short answer is no. The idea of water and wastewater system privatization took off in the early 2000s, and there's been many examples of how that just doesn't really benefit the customers of the utility. We do our best to keep our rates low. We're not out to turn a profit, and we're not answering to shareholders. We're answering to our community, which wants reasonable levels of service at the lowest possible cost. And so the privatization model for wet utilities has just never really penciled out in all of the case studies that have been conducted.
All right, thank you. So looking at the polling here, seeing what people are saying. If you have any last votes out there that you want to get in, go ahead. All right, so that was our previously drafted policy ideas. We want to give folks a chance to ask any other questions that they might have about those ideas. I'll give folks a minute or so here to type, because I know it can take a little bit of time to get all your thoughts down. So we'll see what people have to say. I see one that says proposed policies may be mandatory or suggestive. Yep, of the list of policies discussed today, which ones are staff recommending as mandatory, and why should any of the policies that are not mandatory be included in the comprehensive plan? So like I said, there's that difference in language between encouraging and requiring. I'm not sure I can recall exactly which ones had an encourage or a require, but the reason we would include policies that aren't necessarily a mandate is because that's a way to help direct resources that are maybe more that are allocated discretionarily. So if this is a question of how city leadership or how elected officials are using resources, then this comprehensive plan can give some guidance about the city's priorities, and it makes sure that that's codified for the future. So, there are times when the city has levers that they can pull to give people incentives and allow the market to help move the needle on things, and there are other times when it makes more sense to make it a requirement. Says no examples of mandatory in the list we reviewed. So that's definitely possible. If you went and checked out the list online of the full list of ideas, I am sure that there are some that would be required. Somebody is bringing up the idea of equity in terms of our current library services. I think that's a fair point. And so including that in our update to any library services policies in the comprehensive plan might make a lot of sense. Publicly owned internet service. Is there anybody who can speak to that?
Sure. So the city is looking at one of the things we have heard throughout our input that we don't have a policy on currently, but we're considering drafting one, is about broadband and kind of the availability of that, some sort of internet. And so we are thinking about drafting a policy to that extent. So there's a comment about if any of them are mandatory, this is a good place for them. And there are. So in the full document, for example, we have actually rewritten them from what you saw in the vision document. It used to all start with a verb and an action, but we have changed it to a shall or a should to really clarify. So for example, we have a proposed policy in terms of prohibiting extension of water and sewer outside of city services, city limits, or service districts, unless they annex or unless it's agreed upon. And so that's a shall. So you'll see some of those examples, as Austin said, in the actual document online. And I can drop that link in if that helps again.
All right, thanks, Eunice. Maybe we can jump over to our new policy ideas from other cities. So I think to lead us through the first couple of those, we have either Keith or Jason or Glenn.
I think Jason, go to maybe the next question.
Yeah, I don't see that.
Yeah, can you pull it up? Thanks.
So this is, and again, this is nothing new to the city of Salem, but something that we have been practicing for quite some time. And I think the idea here is to kind of memorialize it in the plan. But one of the ideas, and we work with stakeholders in the North Santiam River watershed extensively, and it's many of you may know the majority of land, over 70% of it, is federally owned, and so. Or federal and state owned. And so we do a lot of work with the state and federal agencies, as well as the Corps of Engineers, because of their management of the Detroit Dam and Big Cliff Dam. What we learned last year after the wildfires is that regardless of how much collaboration we've done in the past, it's never enough. And coordinating with local cities on the ground, as well as large government organizations like the U.S. Forest Service or the Oregon Department of Forestry, we need to make sure that it's a priority, not just after the wildfires or the devastation for that have diminished, but just protecting that source of water, because not only is the North Santiam our source of water, if we do move to the Willamette, everything that happens above Salem is going to affect the water quality of the Willamette, and so the idea here is just to strengthen our relationships with resource agencies and the local communities and local governments, and make sure that we are all moving in the right direction when it comes to protecting the source of drinking water for the city.
So with these questions, we're just asking people for a yes, a no, or an unsure. If you need further clarification, or if you want to explain why you chose the answer you did, feel free to do so in the chat. And there's a question saying that clear cutting that's happening now may be harming our water supply. Is that something you could speak to?
That's correct. And I think there's a lot of concern over the cleanup efforts. Under normal circumstances, non-wildfire recovery, we have staff that monitor proposed cuts both on public and private land. And we submit comments and sometimes even go out and walk the sites. And so we've been really diligent about keeping an eye on the forest practices. Under this environment where contractors have moved in and essentially clear cut along roadways and along stream banks where there may or may not be fire damage, that's a wait and see. We have partnered with U.S. Geological Survey to deploy additional water quality monitors throughout the watershed so we can keep a better eye on it. But we do anticipate that over the next few years, we will see some adverse effects from the fire and from the recovery efforts in clearing the trees and removing buffer zones around streams.
There's also a question about whether or not the city currently uses a triple bottom line framework for its cost benefit analyses. I'm not remembering exactly what that refers to. Maybe you could, Robert, put that in the chat as well, and we could talk to that. In the meantime, it looks like we've got most of the votes in on this one. So why don't we move to the next question while Robert's giving us a little more info. Jason, do you want to speak to this one?
Yeah, so the idea here is through our land use, both through our land use planning and our infrastructure planning, that what we are putting in place now with what we know, right? For instance, all new facilities are being built to current seismic standard. We're doing a lot better job of looking at geotechnical hazards when we allow buildings to be built, both private and public. And we are looking to develop a plan right now. We're working on a seismic resiliency assessment of the water system, and what that will do is it will lay out a list of projects over the next, however fast we can get them accomplished, but generally looking at over the next 50 years that will allow us to start to harden the infrastructure so that we can recover from emergencies and natural disasters much faster. And as I spoke to earlier about diversifying water sources, this is along the same line, right? Is that we are prepared when something happens. For instance, if we lose our water system or a transmission line or something like that, and we have communities or we have spots within the community where residents can go and obtain drinking water from us. One of the things we found out back in 2018 when we had the algal toxin issue is that we felt woefully unprepared for something as simple as handing out water. And so little lessons like that go a long way in helping us prepare for future emergencies. And so this is what this new idea captures essentially.
Thanks, Jason. I think I would just add that a lot of the work in terms of community preparedness and education is being done by our emergency preparedness manager, Greg Walsh, who was here last week. He's having those kind of lunch time, get ready, get prepared for different types of disasters. So I know that's a huge priority for him as well.
So we got a little bit of clarification about that triple bottom line question, and basically it includes environmental and social externalities in addition to the financial cost, I guess. So I don't know if somebody wants to field that one.
So I can't speak to the infrastructure kind of analysis, cost benefit analysis, but I know that with the climate action plan, where the consultants are actually working on a cost benefit analysis of some of those strategies related to climate action, looking not just at GHG reductions, but other impacts, particularly when it comes to equity and the environment, obviously. So I think in that aspect, yes, I can't speak to what the cost benefit analysis is for. Is it for infrastructure projects? Is that what the question is?
Sounds
Infrastructure
like maybe,
and public policies, yeah. Okay.
sounds like maybe a new idea we could consider. All right, jumping over to the next one here. Jason, take it away.
How about we let Glenn answer this one?
Great.
Okay, and this again is kind of on the realm of things that we're already doing. But the idea is that a new development is being designed in accordance with our master plans, so that we are continuing to make sure that as development happens, we have capacities in our things like sewer systems and really what our master plans will plan for. So it's just continuing to make sure that we have enough system capacities. So when we go out to that urban growth boundary, as we were discussing earlier, the urban growth boundary needs to be able to be served. So that's I think it's a good summary of what we're talking about here.
So there's a comment in the chat that new development should be infill and not suburban sprawl. If we don't do that, we'll never be carbon neutral. And I think, if you're following, I know you're following our Salem project, as well as the climate action plan, we are really trying to incentivize and encourage development, infill, and redevelopment. But at the same time, because we do have a fairly large urban growth boundary with a lot of land still available for development, we're trying to make sure that as that land develops, it develops in a way that maybe is more walkable, incorporates some services, so it's not just single family homes that really drives people to get into their cars and have to go to certain locations of the city to access things. So I hear your comment and I appreciate that.
All right, we'll give folks another minute or two to vote here. If anybody else has other comments or clarifying questions, please let us know. And then we'll head on to the next idea. All right, so this idea is about making sure that the campuses in Salem are serving as community amenities and providing services to the neighborhoods they're in. So earlier, I think in our economic development presentation, we had an idea about supporting our local campus institutions as focal points of the community. And somebody asked the question, well, if the city is supporting campuses, how are campuses supporting the community back? And so this idea sort of gets at that notion of making sure that we're encouraging campuses to provide amenities to the surrounding neighborhoods and making sure that their role as a center of community activity is valued and shared with the neighborhood. So that's what this idea is about. If you think it's right for Salem, that's a yes vote. Or if you don't think it's right, that would be a no. There's a question that says, are campuses businesses or higher ed? That's a good question. So, we have a few higher ed campuses in Salem, but I also think it could include things like potentially a hospital campus or the state capitol campus. So I think we're imagining a more inclusive view of what a campus might be. I don't think we're imagining like a business campus, like a business park sort of a thing. It would be more nonprofit oriented, I guess. There's a comment that says we need to ask more of state government, Salem Hospital, Willamette University to be better neighborhoods and offer more to the community, I bet. I appreciate that. And I think that is what this policy would encourage different organizations to do. Jump back to the wording there for folks. And I do know that many of our local campuses and higher education institutions do offer definitely benefit to the community. And so this could also include kind of how we leverage those benefits and make sure that they're shared equitably. All right, why don't we keep rolling? The next one is about public spaces and making sure that they can be enjoyed year round through all weather conditions. So this would get at ensuring that our public spaces are designed with either covered spaces or spaces that can utilize our rainy winter weather for either the benefit of users or the benefit of the environment or, benefit the community in some way so that public spaces aren't just a summertime sort of amenity. And this would be specific to kind of how we design those spaces. Not seeing a whole lot of questions about this one. That's just fine. We'll give folks a little bit longer to vote here. Somebody's making the point that branch libraries are all-weather facilities. Thanks. Somebody's saying they like this, especially when combined with cultural gathering places. That's a good point. It dovetails well with some of the other ideas, I think. All right, we'll keep moving. People can still vote on that for another second or two. Oh, I see a question. What ideas are you asking specifically of Jim on how organizations? Oh, that looks like it's to another participant. All right, let's keep moving. So this new idea is about libraries as gathering spaces and fostering them as a valued community gathering space as the role of libraries continues to evolve and change. So maybe Sarah can give a little bit more detail about what this might entail or just how she understands this new idea.
That's a great question. Yeah, it's kind of a big, giant philosophical question, but it is one that, we have seen the evolution of libraries go in the direction of being gathering spaces for all different kinds of members of the community, you know, libraries being a very equitable space as much as they can be, totally understanding that our two locations are in within a mile of each other and in the downtown area. But you know, we are here for everyone, and it is one of the roles, I think, of the library that continues to expand.
Great, thank you. See a couple people in the chat who support that idea. Give folks one more minute on this one. Go ahead. Awesome. Appreciate the comments, everybody. Love to see an artist or writer in residence at the library. Cool idea. All right, so this next idea is about urban orchards and supporting efforts to inventory, develop, and utilize Salem's urban orchards to increase the resiliency of the local food system and help reduce food insecurity. So what that means is that we have a certain number of trees within Salem that provide fruit. And so this would talk about making sure that we're supporting organizations who are working to either document where all of those trees are or utilize the food that they can produce to help make sure that we're making our food system as resilient as possible and understanding what opportunities we have to support people who might be facing food insecurity with those urban orchards. And support in this case could mean just technical advice or support in terms of hosting a map for whatever organization were to pursue this, or you know, providing some sort of backing to help. That's a good question. So there's a question that says, does Salem Harvest do this now? And I don't believe that Salem Harvest doesn't necessarily manage that sort of thing. Eunice, do you want to talk to that as well?
I was just going to say, Salem Harvest does, obviously they have a program where they have volunteers that help pick food from, you know, people's backyards to farms that that food would otherwise go to waste. And so I think they're along these lines, I think it very much aligns with this idea, but I think this policy would maybe broaden that.
Perfect.
Thanks for remembering. I was trying to think of the name of Salem something. I was like, pickers, gleaners, harvest.
Somebody suggesting that these could be incorporated into community gardens and existing parks. More urban orchards and community gardens. I think we do have a policy idea about expanding opportunities for things like community gardens. So yeah, I appreciate that. All right, why don't we keep going? So just another chance for people to ask questions about those new policy ideas and share comments on those. And then we also are interested in your ideas. If there's something you didn't see covered here, or other ideas that maybe you want to make sure we're considering, please do share those as well. I'll turn it back over to Eunice.
Thanks, Austin and Sarah and Keith and Glenn and Jason. Looks like there's another comment. Let's see if I can read it. Over the last few weeks, number of people have participated less than 3 dozen. How does staff believe the modest turnout impacts our recommendations to council regarding policies to include the comprehensive plan? So Ian, I appreciate that question. You're right in that we're probably getting like 20 to 30 people at these weekly policy meetings. And while we think it's been great discussion, we're getting a lot of good ideas and feedback. We're not by any means limiting our recommendations and our revisions and our additions to our policies to just the input we're getting at these meetings. Austin and I have been out and about and will continue to be out and about at different organizations across the community, whether that's neighborhood associations, business, cultural communities, and others, and taking that input as well, in addition to our survey. So, this is one way people can provide input, but it's not the only way. Any other questions or ideas? Jim, go ahead.
Thank you. I put a note in the chat. You all should be aware of the branch libraries in Oregon that combine libraries and housing. And it's just a terrific idea. An example would be the Woodstock branch library in Portland that has the library on the ground floor and apartments on top. And another one is in Cornelius, Oregon, where I think they have like affordable low-income senior housing on top of their library in Cornelius. So, to combine affordable housing and libraries, might be just a great idea, mixed use libraries. I hope you'll think about that.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment, Jim. I'm not sure if we've ever explored that. I won't put you on the spot, Sarah. Oh, go ahead, Sarah, if you want to.
I was going to say what we have right now are pop-up libraries in our senior centers. So like Capitol Manor has a pop-up library. So we do have some combination or co-location of libraries. But yeah, I think, of course, as these things evolve, it would be something we'd be willing to look into and see if we could do here.
And there's a couple other comments about, just great ideas and suggestions, whether they belong in the comprehensive plan. Policies remains a question. And I would say, Ian, to that comment, we are, and from the beginning of this process, we've tried not to constrain ourselves just to kind of housing, economic development, transportation, but to think more broadly to the extent that we can really understand the broad kind of priorities that the community has. And so perhaps this is a little broader than your kind of traditional comprehensive plan, but I appreciate that comment. There's another comment here about art. Let me scroll up one second. There are other great examples of affordable housing developments that incorporate art and art education spaces for all ages. Fantastic. And I think, with the question related to kind of combining libraries and other co-location, one of the things we did here was if we continue to pursue the idea of neighborhood hubs, small scale services and shops, for example, in residential neighborhoods, folks have said they'd love to see some sort of library services in those as those centers of kind of activity develop, if they do develop. So I think we'll go ahead and move on. If there's other suggestions, feel free to drop it in the chat. So we're going to be doing, to the previous comment, a lot more outreach on these policies in addition to these weekly meetings. We do have a survey in English and in Spanish online that is still open, and we're still going to community meetings. So if you are associated with a community group, an organization, a neighborhood, we're happy to come and talk and get more input. And we'll take all that input and revise the policies, add to the policies, and present that back to the community before going through an adoption process, which we hope to start by the end of the year. That adoption process will include goals and policies and an updated comprehensive plan, as well as comprehensive plan map and related zoning changes. So this is just our project website, cityofsalem.net/oursalem. We're constantly putting information on that website, so please feel free to check back there. And this is just a clip of our survey so you can see what it looks like. So the other work that's going on in addition to policies, our new interactive map, that's a really draft zoning map. And I think that was just launched maybe a week and a half ago. And so we've gotten a lot of questions and comments on that map. And so that's why next week we'll be holding, instead of a policy meeting, we're going to hold a zoning map meeting, but at the same time, same place, 12:30, 5 o'clock, no, 12 and 5:30. And in addition, we did kick off our zoning subcommittee meetings that focus on greenhouse gas emissions reductions and changes to the code that can help make that happen. That first meeting was in April, and the next meeting is going to be May 27th. So those are open to the public as well. If you want to attend, or if you want to submit comments in advance, or if you want to actually give comments orally at the meeting, all the information is on our project website. And that's it. That's just my name and number and our project website. Please feel free to contact us anytime. I'm just going to leave some time and space for anyone else who has questions or comments. I see there's a question about the historic preservation plan. Yes, and I'll put the link in the chat. Oh, and done. Thank you, Zach. Awesome. And any other kind of questions? Sarah, Keith, Jason, Glenn, anything you want to add? Austin? No? Great. And Zach, thanks so much. In the chat, there's a link to subscribe to our email updates. We send out periodic updates when there's new opportunities for engagement or major milestones in the project. But feel free also just to give me a call, shoot me an email. I'm always happy to respond. No one has anything else? We're done early. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. See you tonight if you want to come back.